Glad to have you back for another Lakers cookery class. This week we're going to be doing pastry. So I'm going to show you in our food processor how to make very quick and easy pastry. Then afterwards we're going to put it together and make a nice apple tart. If you want, you can always do it by hand if you don't have a food processor, but I'm showing you the quick, easy way. So the first thing I want to do for making my pastry is I want to sieve the flour and the salt together. So we have 200 grams of plain flour and we have 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So at this point I'm going to transfer into my food processor. So this is our sieved flour and salt. And into that I'm going to add our cold cubed butter. I kept it nice and cold in the fridge till I needed it. And I'm going to mix that together. I have a blade in our processor. And I'm going to blitz it till it becomes fine breadcrumbs. Excuse the noise. So you can see here, this is the consistency that we would call fine breadcrumbs. And the next thing we're going to do is add in some water. And I'm just going to add that 1 tablespoon at a time until the pastry comes together in one lump. And you stop immediately at that point because you can't take water away, but you can keep adding it slowly at a time. So don't overdo it at first. So you can see this is the stage I called where it clumps together, and now we're going to take it out of the food processor and give it a bit of a mix by hand. So now you can see I've taken the pastry out and put it on a floured surface, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of a mix. One thing about pastry is we don't want to overwork our dough. So it's not like bread where you keep kneading it. In this instance we just want to bring it together into a nice ball. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap that in some cling film and I'm going to chill it for about 30 minutes before we use it. So with this recipe, we've made this amount of pastry, which is perfect for doing a quiche, the base of a quiche, or the base of something like a Bakewell tart. If you want to make an apple tart, just double it up. We'll end up with a larger quantity. This should make the top and the bottom of a tart. So while our pastry was chilling in the fridge, I have peeled our apples and I'm adding a little bit of lemon juice to them just to stop them going brown. It's not a real issue if they do, it's just a natural process, but this will just save them from discoloration. So this is our pastry made earlier. I need enough for a top and a bottom, so I'll cut it in two and roll it out. Our usual, we're going to gently roll forwards and backwards and keep it turning so it doesn't stick to the counter. What we want to do is roll it out to the size of our oven-proof plate. So you can either do it on a plate or you could do it in a deep dish, like a flan dish. If you want to do a pie, a deeper pie, I'm going to use a plate. Yeah, so we're going to check it's the right size for our plate. And if we're happy with that, we'll put the base pastry. And I'm going to use the rolling pin to help me place it over. That's a good size. What I'll do now is I will trim against the edge of the plate. to do now is I just want to use a little bit of water, and I'm just going to dampen around the edge, and that's so when I put the top on, you'll give it something to stick to. Perfect. And next up, what we want to do is we want to put our apples in. It'll be nice and generous. You can chop these in any shape you want. I've just done some slices. Just want to make sure we get some of them out near the edge, but not right on top of the edge, or we would no way of sealing the pastry. Put it all in. Now these apples are going in raw. You can of course stew the apple in advance if you prefer it that way. And in some ways that makes it a little bit easier because you can judge the sweetness of the apple. Whereas now I'm just going to put a generous shaking of sugar on top, but it's actually quite difficult to judge the flavour and the sweetness. So I'd rather it's not bitter, so I'm going to be generous. The next thing to do is I'm going to roll out the top and put it on. Now once my pastry is big enough to go on the top of the tart, I'll do it the same way as I did the base. I'll use the rolling pin. So now I want to seal the edges of the tart, and I'm going to use a fork and press down. This will mean that it will join the top piece of pastry to the base where we've already dampened the base. Also gives a nice little pattern. I'm going to trim the edges. What I actually want to do now is just to put a couple of little holes to let the steam out. I also have a spare piece of pastry here, and I'm just going to cut out very roughly a couple of little leaves, and I'm going to decorate the top with these. Again, a little bit of water to stick. So to give our apple tart a nice finish, I'm going to brush the top of it with some beaten egg. This will help to make it nice and golden. So I'm going to bake this in the oven, gas mark 4, 170 for a fan, maybe 180 if it's a conventional oven, for about 25 to 30 minutes. Keep an eye on it because depending on the thickness of your pastry and the amount of apple you have in it, it could take more or could take less. Last thing, a little sprinkle of sugar. Okay, into the oven. So my apple pie has been in the oven for about 25 minutes. Very happy with that. Golden, beautiful.